So as I've been talking, you may have had a few questions simmering in the back of your mind. One of them might have been this: how can we actually resist the short-term addictions of digital media? Because this is something that I think a lot of us are grappling with, and you could do a whole course on this, of course. So let me just say a little bit about what I personally do to resist digital media addictions. I think the first thing I do is to try and give myself a little bit of resilience to all those companies trying to steal my present moment, steal my time by very simple practices like I do not allow my phone into the bedroom to disturb my sleep, or more than that. We do not have phones at our kitchen table, when we're having dinner. When I sit down at my computer in the morning at 9 o'clock, I turn off the internet using an app. And if I have anything I need to look up online, I jot it down on a piece of paper. This is all basic stuff. But beyond that, what do? Well, in the morning when I get up, I go out into the garden and I try and find one thing in the garden that has changed. Maybe a spider web that has been woven or a flower that is opened. And I think that just really brings me mindfully into the present moment and helps me in the confrontation with digital culture, which will happen during the day, no doubt, at some point. And actually, just related to that, something I've started doing recently is trying to live my life 10% slower. You might be thinking, like, what is he talking about? What I mean is I'm just trying to do stuff, everything 10% slower. Walk 10% slower, eat 10% slower, talk 10% slower. Of course, you can't do it exactly 10%, but it's a kind of a mindfulness hack in a way. It just makes me, or catapults my mind into the present moment much more effectively. But you've probably got your own practices. You might want to share them with others doing this course online as you try to confront the very difficult challenge of the addictions of digital media. A second question that might have been coming up for you is this: isn't the biggest problem that we really face in the world overpopulation? That there are just too many people, and what we need is the long-term planning of cathedral thinking to deal with it. In fact, almost every time I give a public talk about being a good ancestor, someone will ask me a question about population. Isn't this what we really should be thinking about and worrying about? So let me say something very briefly about that. I think one of the really interesting things here is that although we often think population is escalating faster and faster and faster, well, on a global level, actually the rate of global population growth has been declining since 1970 for over half a millennia. In other words, population's been going up, but at a slower and slower rate. And the predictions are that it will probably level off and stabilize at between 10 and 11 billion people by around 2050, which is still a lot of people. But let's recognize that the rate is slowing down. And let's also recognize that, in fact, we know a lot about how to limit population growth. What development aid work and research has shown us since the end of the Second World War that if you want to slow down population growth, there's something very simple that you do. You don't try and do a China-style one-child policy by banning people having children. What you do is you educate young girls. You educate women, you give them access to healthcare, and this tends to take women into the workforce and also to get them more generally to decide to have fewer children. And this is what brings down population growth rates. It's true, of course, certain parts of the world do have growing populations, like in Nigeria, big cities in Nigeria are growing, but other cities around the world and countries have declining populations. So in Spain, by 2100 at current rates, the population might be half of what it is today. They're going to have to import more and more labor just to pay for their pensions and welfare systems. So there's a mix of things going on, but I think the main point to make around population is this, that in a way, the problem isn't the numbers of people, but it's the fact that wealthy consumers in the global north, because of their consumption patterns, are having a huge and disproportionate ecological footprint. That this is what we need to be challenging, that hyper-consumerism of the wealthy strata of society, which is pushing our planet to the brink.